It is my honor and delight to introduce my very dear friend and mentor and teacher. Well, how lucky I am that I have teacher and friend in one. Deepak. He is well known, no need to introduce him, but he integrates science and spirituality. He integrates his whole life into natural world and human world. His love of nature and his love of humanity. He's a healer of the planet and a healer of the people. And we are all privileged to have Deepak coming to speak at the Tagore Festival. And I am so pleased and happy that I am welcoming Deepak this afternoon here. Deepak.
So, first of all, it's great to be here. It's my second time, thanks to Satish. And it's a great privilege, Satish, to be here. I'm doing 2 sessions, and I'm told that there are different people for the 2 different sessions. So my first session right now is about the relevance of Tagore. And the second session is about the mechanics of healing. So I'd be sure not to overlap too much. I became familiar with Tagore when I was about 12 years of age, or perhaps less, and my father gave me this little book, Gitanjali, which has stayed with me throughout my life. And of course I read all of Tagore afterwards, but kept coming back to this because it was my first exposure. So I didn't know why. I felt good when I read the poems. You heard a lot of people here who are really expert in Tagore's life. There are a lot of people who have done academic dissertations on Tagore and his work, the relevance. What I'm going to say to you is totally from my personal experience, okay? Because I'm not a scholar, I've never been, I'm not an academic, I've never been, even though I'm writing with academics these days. I felt good and I couldn't explain why. Then I went to medical school, and medical school was very interesting for me because first of all, in the beginning of medicine, when you go to medical school, and I went to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi, and in the beginning it's very intoxicating to be in a place where you're dealing with big issues, people getting sick, people getting cancer, people traumatized. And it, as I said, is intoxicating because you feel very powerful. You feel you can actually do something to make a difference. Also, in medicine, modern medicine, as we call it, we have a lot of pride in the scientific method. So, as physicians, we feel that the whole experience of healing is a scientific endeavor. But what you also see in your clinical years, as you get a little bit along, is you see death. And you see people dying. And in India we go to medical school pretty early, age 17 or 18. And you start to get affected by the fact that there's a lot of suffering and that people feel very disempowered when they are facing the inevitable. Now, in a sense, we're all dying anyway. We're all on death row. And I think the only Uncertainty is the method of execution and the length of reprieve. But we don't realize it, okay, But all you have to do is look behind you and the Prince of Death is stalking you. And you look again and he's a little nearer. But we don't think about it. We think about it when somebody gets seriously sick or in our family, not if they're not really connected to us. We think of death perhaps when we confront our own mortality and the urgency of it. So I would also hang out, of course, in emergency rooms where there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of trauma. And very frequently I would see patients going through the death experience, if you want to call it that, in a few hours. Where somebody's had a heart attack and you've done everything and you're trying to, or they've had an accident or whatever, and you're doing everything you can, but it's too late. And so within a few hours, literally within a few hours, you see a person going through first denial, it can't be happening to me, then a lot of anger, why is this happening to me? And then slowly a sense of resignation. I won't say acceptance. Acceptance is a state of grace. But resignation, which comes from frustration, and then panic. And many times you see right before your eyes somebody dying in a state of utter and total panic. So it's very distressing for a physician. And then, many times I would come back from the emergency room having seen this, and then I would open up something from my favorite book. And I would read something like this from Tagore. I know that the day will come when my sight of this earth shall be lost, and life will take its leave in silence, drawing the last curtain over my eyes. Yet stars will watch at night, and morning rise as before, and hours heave like sea waves, casting up pleasures and pains. When I think of this end of my moments, the barrier of the moments breaks, and I see by the light of death your world with its careless treasures. Rare is its lowliest seat, rare is its meanest of lives. Things that I longed for in vain, and things that I got, let them pass. Let me but truly possess the things that I ever spurned and overlooked. And so, reading something like that, I would say to myself, what kind of mind can actually welcome death, this amazing grace, if you will. And to go towards the end of his life did suffer quite a bit. He was in pain. But he could say these words. What kind of a consciousness does that? I have got my leave, bid me farewell, my brothers. I bow to you all and take my departure. Here I give back the keys of my door, and I give up all claims to my house. I only ask for last kind words from you. We were neighbors for long, but I received more than I could give. Now the day has dawned, and the lamp that lit my dark corner is out. A summons has come, and I'm ready for my journey. And then this, one of my favorites, where he says, it's the great mystery, actually, of our existence, of our consciousness, where he says, I was not aware of the moment when I first crossed the threshold of this life. What was the power that made me open out into this vast mystery like a bud in the forest at midnight? And when in the morning I looked upon the light, I felt in a moment that I was no stranger in this world. that the inscrutable without name and form had taken me in its arms in the form of my own mother. Even so in death, the same unknown will appear as ever known to me. And because I love life, I know I shall love death as well. The child cries out when from the right breast the mother takes it away, in the very next moment to find in the left one its consolation. That says it all. You don't have to actually explain it, you know. I was listening to Jonathan's talk this morning, and I was realizing, you know, the difference between science and, if you want to call it, the religious experience is that science empirically tries to know the facts. Science then tries to explain the facts, and then frequently science asks itself, how can I use this? Usually, how can I use this to exploit the earth or exploit other people or go to war or whatever? Of course, you know, it's because of science and the classical laws of science that I'm here. I had to take a plane, and it works. So, you know, we can't deny the great benefits that science has had. But it's about facts, it's about empirical facts, and it's about how to use those facts. It's also an attempt to study the truth, because there are scientists, and there are really good scientists, who are not looking for how can I use this to make a better technology or to make a machine or, you know, do something useful. Many scientists actually are interested in knowing the nature of reality. And therefore science is a definite method for exploring what we think the truth may be. It's a legitimate method, and science uses protocols. There's a method to explore the truth. There's an experiment to see if the theory is valid, and then there are results that we can share with our peers, and if the results match what we have, then we say we've got a reasonably good idea of what the truth might be. And so this kind of science has been extremely successful, as you know. For the last 300 years, this is the science that has created most of what we call the industrial age, you know, starting from the locomotive to the automobile to the jet planes that we take to get from place to place. But then, about 100 years ago, science took a turn from what we call classic physics, based on observation, to a new science, and the revolution took place mostly in Europe, mostly through people like Heisenberg and Wolfgang Pauli and Schrödinger, and in England, Paul Dirac, many others, Einstein, of course, Niels Bohr. And this is the quantum revolution that we saw about 100 years ago that shook the foundations of what we thought truth was. And even though Einstein himself was one of the pioneers of the new science, he was shaken by it, and he did not accept it till his death. Even on his death, the equations that he wrote were not satisfying to him. He could write the equations, but they violated everything that he knew of what he called reality. So again, thanks to this beautiful magazine that you put out, Satish. There's a beautiful article here, The Mathematician and the Mystic, from Andrew Robinson and Deepak Home. And this is a conversation that Tagore and Einstein had in 1930. Previously, they had met before also at Caltech, outside of Caltech, where I was privy to a debate that led to the book that you're holding in your hand at the moment, which we'll talk about later. But here's how it goes, this conversation. It's a very important conversation because in many ways it is as relevant today as it was before. So Einstein says there are two different conceptions about the nature of the universe. The world as a unity dependent on humanity, and the world as reality independent of the human factor. So that's Einstein. To which Tagore responds, the world is a human world. The scientific view of it is also of the scientific man. Therefore, the world apart from us does not exist. It's a relative world, depending for its reality upon our consciousness. And Einstein responded by saying, truth then, or beauty, is not independent of man, ? Tagore, no. Einstein, if there were no human beings anymore, the Apollo Belvedere no longer would be beautiful. Tagore, no. Einstein, I agree with you. I agree with regard to this conception of beauty, but not with regard to truth. I'll repeat that. I agree with regard to this conception of beauty, but not with regard to truth. He's making a distinction here. Beauty is subjective, but truth is objective. This is the scientific method, right? Tagore, why not? Truth is realized through men. Einstein, I cannot prove my conception is right, but that is my religion. It's a very important conversation, okay, because at least Einstein is willing to accept a very basic premise here, that science is my religion. And according to science, truth is objective. In fact, you probably heard Einstein's other famous, when the whole quantum revolution was taking place, and Heisenberg and Niels Bohr and Einstein, and they're all arguing with each other, particularly Heisenberg. You've heard probably these famous phrases, when Einstein first hears of the uncertainty principle, he says, I don't think that God would play dice with the universe because the laws of nature are predictable. Reality is fixed. And that's why we can do science. If reality was not predictable, we wouldn't be able to do science. And if you've kept up with this literature, I think you're also familiar with Stephen Hawking's expression that God not only plays dice with the universe, but God throws the dice where you will not find it. So Einstein went to his deathbed fighting the idea that reality is subject to revision, that reality is not fixed out there. We might even say that science is taking to us a place where we are now confronted with the so-called reality illusion. What the great Vedantists of India call Maya. Yesterday, we were having a conversation over dinner, and Satish asked me, you commented that Maya is frequently translated as illusion. She's the goddess of illusion, the veil that separates us from the real reality. The veil that separates us from the real reality. Well, if you look at the etymology of the word reality, of the word Maya, Maya, Mata, Matrika, mother, mater, matter, meter, myth, measurement, time, music. They all refer, a matrix, they all refer to the same thing. Okay. Maya is the measurement of the infinite as it becomes the finite. That's the true original etymology of the word Maya. You know, of course, in the Vedic literature, it's full of Purnamidha, Purnamidham, how the infinite becomes the finite while remaining the infinite. And we heard that in this morning's poetry also. And that was something that Einstein perhaps felt intuitively but could not accept. You know, one of Einstein's greatest contributions, of course, besides the theories, both the relative and general theory of relativity, is the fact that he was the original person who articulated the basic concepts of quantum mechanics. And later, in his equation, which goes by his name, Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen equation, he actually published a paper in 1935, which is now known as the EPR paper, in which he postulated how counterintuitive the new concepts of quantum mechanics are. Today, it's a given that even though Einstein himself disagreed with his own proposition of EPR theorem, that there is a fundamental level of existence in the universe which is quote-unquote non-local. Okay, and I know a lot of people here are not scientists perhaps, but basically this is what non-locality means. There's a level, fundamental level in nature where not only is everything connected with everything, in fact connection is not the word, everything is correlated with everything. Everything is instantly correlated with everything else. Which means that if you tickle the universe here, it can laugh there. And it does so instantly. So if you measure the position or the momentum of a particle here, somewhere here, instantly a particle somewhere which could be millions of years, light years away, which means it would take light years, a million years to go light, the speed of light going at 186,000 miles per second, take millions of years to get there. But the fundamental tenets of non-local realities, that if you measure a particle here, in whatever way you measure it, momentum, position, spin, it instantly determines the behavior of a particle which may be millions of years away, millions of light years away, instantly. Okay, this is also in violation, seemingly in violation of the theory of relativity, because nothing is supposed to travel faster than the speed of light. And yet this is a fundamental mathematical formulation, first through Einstein, then John Bell in 1982, proved by a French experimentalist, Alain Aspect, and then again 1998, and now many times over. Okay? So there's a fundamental level of reality where everything is instantly correlated. Instantly. Where everything, correlations remain unmediated. Unmediated means there's no signal that goes from here to there. Things happen simultaneously. What happens here influences what happens there instantly. Or even better, if you ask a question here, you can get an answer there instantly. And this is what troubled the pioneers, and still is troubling to many scientists. Not being tuned in to the spiritual discipline, usually scientists find it very difficult to understand how this could happen. And yet it's experimental, it's validated, it's mathematically true, can't deny it. The correlation is instantaneous, it's unmediated, there's no signal that establishes or causes the correlation. It's unmediated, there's no mediation, and it's unmitigated. Unmitigated means the robustness of the correlation does not diminish with distance in space or time. Distance in space is also the same thing as distance in time. Okay, now if you weren't kind of mathematically oriented or trying to figure this out, and you had any spiritual experience, you would say there's a level of reality that is omnipresent, that is omnipotent, that is omniscient, because what happens here is known there. A question here asked, answer is available everywhere else in the universe. In fact, the more we study non-locality now, which is accepted by the way, the more we feel that it explains how the universe functions. That there is simultaneity, there's no linear cause-effects in this realm. How do biological organisms operate with simultaneity? The human body, for example, has 100 trillion cells, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Every cell is performing 100,000 activities every second. And every cell instantly knows and correlates its activity with every other cell. How does a human body think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, make a baby all at the same time? And while a biological organism can do that, it tracks the movement of stars and planets because your biological rhythms are the symphony of the whole universe. Your biology responds to everything that's happening in the whole universe instantly. Okay. So there's some deep music, some deep symphony in the music, and all of us dance to it, even though we can't name the tune. And in fact, when you're not dancing to it, you get sick. Okay. There's something that is transcendent. You might say trans-empirical about this reality. So for 300 years, we've been the victims in a way of an empirical science. By empirical means, science is valid if you can observe things through your five senses, if the experience is through the five senses. And if you cannot experience it, if you cannot measure it, then it's not real. And that's the fixed reality independent of our consciousness. That's what Einstein is saying. But Tagore turns out to be a greater scientist. A greater scientist because he's saying it's not like that. He knows it intuitively, and today we know it scientifically. Okay, so let me take you through a little bit of journey of why this is so relevant right now to us, not only in science, but for our very survival. I'll take a couple of minutes, but there is the empirical world which we're experiencing through our five senses. So this table here, your physical body, this room, etc. This is the empirical world. But now I'd like you to experience a non-empirical, trans-empirical world. So just right now, as you're listening to me, just in your imagination, think of a sunset over the mountains or the ocean or whatever. Can you see it? Where's the picture? Okay. Think of a rainbow. Can you see the colors? Can you hear your favorite song or the voice of someone you love? Can you taste chocolate ice cream? or strawberries. Where is this happening? You know, if I told you, imagine a dog barking in the middle of the night and you can hear it, or a newborn baby crying, where is this happening? Science has no answer for this. In science, this is called the hard problem. Okay? And what's the hard problem? It's the white elephant in the room that nobody wants to look at. It's consciousness. Okay? So today, I could go inside your brain. We have technology today. You can take a carbon atom, you can radio label it, you can put it in a sugar molecule, you can inject it, and then I can look inside your brain as you were imagining the sunset. Okay? And when I look inside the brain, I don't see sunsets. What I see is electricity and some chemicals that we call neurotransmitters. But you're not experiencing electricity. You're experiencing a sunset. You're experiencing the colors of a rainbow. Now, of course, there's a correlation between the electricity in your brain and the experience you have. But what came first? Did the electricity come first, or did the experience come first? Did the experience come first, the electricity, or did you create both of them by having the intention? This is called the hard problem. The soft problem is, oh yeah, there's a place in the brain where there's activity. But it doesn't explain how you had the experience or where the experience is occurring. Sir Arthur Eddington, who was a cosmologist in the last century, who was actually very prominent in this debate, he said the best answer we can give is that something unknown is doing we don't know what. No idea. And not only do we not have an idea, we don't have a theory for what the idea could be. There's no scientific theory for consciousness. So they're looking for it, but they don't have a theory. I was just in a conference in Sweden, a 1-week conference on the science of consciousness. And everybody is looking at consciousness somewhere in the brain or somewhere in the subatomic realm. And no one can find it. And no one seems to realize that when you're looking for consciousness, then it is your consciousness that is looking for consciousness. And by definition, that's a subjective experience. Any objective validation is at best inferential. So not only is science frustrated, but science will continue to be frustrated because consciousness cannot be found objectively and will not be found objectively. And that's why, because Tagore was a product of the great Indian tradition of Vedanta, he understood this. You know, if you read the Rishis and the Upanishads, they say, when defining consciousness, they say that which cannot be imagined, but without which there is no imagination. That which cannot be seen, but without which there is no seeing. That which cannot be conceptualized, but without which there are no concepts. And so on. That which cannot be perceived, etc., etc. When you're looking for consciousness, it's actually your consciousness that's doing the looking. So that's why this argument never got anywhere, because Einstein couldn't relate to that. He couldn't understand that. Now we are a step further. You say, okay, what's this table made up of? You say, okay, this table is made up of matter. By the way, I was also telling Satish last night, it's our language that creates images in our mind. And so many times languages don't necessarily describe what's happening, they create what's happening. Your language creates the images from the words that you use. And English is a materialistic language, thanks to Isaac Newton. Okay, when something is not important to you, what do you say? What do you say? Doesn't matter. You dismissed it because it doesn't matter. So that's the image we have. But let's look at something material right here. Okay, this is made up of molecules. The molecules themselves are atoms. The atoms are subatomic particles that are moving at lightning speeds through huge empty spaces. And these particles are not material entities. In fact, even though we all think of particles as real, no one's ever seen a particle. Not even at the Hadron Collider, right? What you see is tracks of particles, what has been there. Okay, but you never see a particle. And what's a particle before it's a particle? What happens to a particle if you're not observing it? Or what happens to a particle that is not interacting with other particles? Do you know what happens? It evolves into a wave that spreads out over the entire universe. If you're not looking at a particle, or if that particle is not being interacted with another particle, it spreads out as a wave. And then you say, a wave of what? And the best answer that science can give you is a wave of potentiality. Because the wave has no mass energy. The wave has no mass energy. It has no mass, and it has no energy. So it's a wave of potentiality. You say, where is this wave? I mean, I've gone to the best scientist who is writing this book. I had to do that. I said, where are waves of potential? Where do they exist? And somebody will say it's a mathematical space. Somebody else will say it's Hilbert space. And, when you pin them down, they say, it's a number. It's a number. It's not a real wave because it has no mass energy. These numbers become particles, the particles interact and they create the whole material universe. Now that's a very interesting thing, isn't it? Concepts become the material universe. Again, Sir James Jeans, another great scientist, he said the universe is a big thought. Okay. The universe is a big thought. And of course, if you read the Bhagavad Gita and you read other Upanishads, Lord Krishna, when he's explaining to Arjuna the mechanics of creation, he says, Prakratim swam vashtabhai vishrajami puna puna. Curving back within myself, I create again and again. I create the mind, I create the body, and I create the universe. So the universe is not out there. Okay, the universe is in your consciousness. Period. There is no universe outside of consciousness. And if there were, you would never know of it. Because there's no way you can get out of consciousness. The universe is in our consciousness. Your physical body is in your consciousness. And your mind is in your consciousness. That's what it means. Prakritim swam vashtabhai. Curving back within itself, consciousness creates the mind, creates the body, creates the experience of the universe, and it's all happening within that single consciousness, and that's the mind of God. That's what we call Brahman. We call the universe Brahmand because Brahmand is an experience within Brahman, not outside of Brahman. It's within Brahman. There's nothing outside of Brahman. It's the being that becomes. People like Richard Dawkins and other people, England has contributed a lot to the world, but Dawkins, my God, that's a disservice to humanity. I have to say this, because it's a strident straw man that he's put up there a dead white male who created the universe, and now let's destroy him. So God is not a carpenter. God is the infinite consciousness that differentiates itself into space-time, energy, information, and the world of objects, all within itself. It's the observer, it's the observed, it's the process of observation, all self-contained. Jonathan this morning used the word catalytic. Okay, actually the word catalytic is drawn from a new understanding in science. It's called autopoiesis, which means self-creating, self-evolving, self-repairing, and self-regulating, all within itself. So the universe is the becoming of being, the Brahmand of Brahman. And why does this have relevance? Why does this have relevance? Because all religious experience, no matter how it ends up being articulated, all religious experience, no matter how it ends up being articulated, is based on what we call a transcendent experience. It's the power of the transcendent. The transcendent is beyond the subject-object split. So right now, I have the feeling that there's somebody here, or here, mostly here, but if not here, somebody here, or somewhere inside my body that is looking at somebody outside over there. This is the subject-object split on which all empirical science is built. But the subject-object split it's artificial. Nature is one. And in fact, if I went inside your body and looked everywhere for you, I wouldn't find you. You know, and people have tried that. You do all kinds of neurosurgery. You know, Dr. what's his name? John Eccles, not John Eccles in Canada. It'll come to me. But, you know, he was a neurosurgeon, Wilder Penfield. He was very interested in looking for the choice maker. And so he would operate on his patients, stimulate the motor cortex and see what happened to their body. So here's a classical experiment. He's stimulating the motor cortex and the patient's arm started to go up like this. He said, what is happening? And the patient said, my arm is moving up. He said, are you moving your arm? He said, no, it's moving up. Maybe you're moving it for me by stimulating my brain. Now, Dr. Penfield did something very clever. He said, I'm going to stimulate your brain in order for your arm to go up like this, but I want you to do something else. I want you to resist that and move it somewhere else. And so, even as Dr. Penfield was stimulating the brain so that the arm should go up in this direction, the patient resisted it and then he moved it somewhere else. And Dr. Penfield came to a great conclusion. He said, the brain is telling the body to move like this, but there's someone else here who's telling the brain, I'm not going to let you do that, I'm going to move it this way. He said, I know where the command post is, but where's the commander? And he spent his life looking for the choice maker. You and I are choice makers, right? We make choices. You can't find the choice maker in the brain or in the body. Nor can you find the one who remembers. So if I tell you, remember yesterday's dinner, what you did, or how what you ate for dinner, or remember your childhood, can't find this person. And yet our whole of Vedanta philosophy is built on these two aspects of our consciousness. We make choices and we remember. What we remember we call sanskaras, and the choices we make are called vasanas, and they come from past experiences called karma. So in many ways, karma, memory, desire, they're all what you might call the software of our soul. But this guy or this person cannot be found in the brain or the body, no matter what we do. So, there's a principle in science, it's called Occam's razor. And the principle says that when you don't have an explanation for something, then the best explanation is the simplest explanation. What would be the simplest explanation that you can't be found in your body? You're not in your body. See, these days lots of people talk about out-of-body experiences. The real mystery is how do you get an in-body experience when you're not in it? So I'm not in my body, and you're not in your body, and yet we have this very convincing hallucination that I'm here and you're there. Now, if you understand non-locality, if you understand that when we go beyond particles, we enter probability waves or waves of potentiality that are all in a transcendent realm, that's what our rishis call samadhi. Okay? It's where the observer, the process of the observation and the observed all become one, and that oneness is outside of space-time. And being outside of space-time, it can neither be destroyed nor created. Bhagavad Gita, fire cannot burn it, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it, it's unborn, it's outside of space and time, and it's you. And that's the whole goal of spiritual seeking. Practicality, well, if that's who we are, and that transcendent experience can give me a valid morality, a valid ethics based on Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, then I don't see myself. It's not that we are connected. We're inseparable. Okay? There's no distance in space-time. It's transcendent. All religious experience is based on just these three ideas. The transcendental experience, the inseparability of all life, and finally, the ethics that emerges from that. Truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, evolution that emerges. There's nothing more. If you have that, and if you live that, that's a spiritual life. Okay, and in order to get that, you have to actually, all you have to do is get rid of the guy who you think is there, who's actually not there. Okay, so I'm going to end with two poems of Tagore, who says it much more elegantly. He says, "He whom I enclose with my name is weeping in this dungeon. I am ever busy building this wall all around. And as this wall goes up into the sky, day by day, I lose sight of my true being in its dark shadow. I take pride in this great wall, and I plaster it with dust and sand, lest a least hole should be left in this name. And for all the care I take, I lose sight of my true being." Continuing in the same poem, "I came alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this that follows me in the silent dark? I move aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word that I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to your door in his company." Thank you.
What I was feeling that when science and spirituality come together, if you can bring that in your life, you become a poet. And so Tagore's poetry is that combination of science and spirituality in real life. And no one could articulate that better than Deepak. And you have done that wonderful job. Thank you very much. so fluent, non-stop. Yeah. And Deepak, as mentioned, is writing this book with this famous scientist, Leonard Mlodinow.
His name is Leonard Mlodinow. He wrote The Grand Design with Stephen Hawking. Just finished that book, which was...
Yeah, and it's War of the World Views. Science is spirituality. That's the book. Random House publishing it, and it's coming out
in October.
In October. So please look out for it. And Einstein and Tagores' conversation is in the latest of Resurgence, which is available at Resurgence bookstall. Now we have 10 minutes of question-answer session. And since the 10 minutes with such a big audience, I would like you to ask a very simple but clear one-sentence, two-sentence questions. No statement, no big preamble, but just the core of the statement. First question here. Core of the statement. If you go too long, I will be sorry to interrupt you.
Deepak, you mentioned that Penfield was looking for the choice maker in the brain and he couldn't find it, and suggested that the choice maker is non-physical. If that's the case, how does this non-physical choice maker interact with the physical brain?
There are three views in science. One is the dualistic view from Descartes, non-physical soul and physical body. It's no longer valid because it violates very basic first law of conservation of energy. What's the mediator? So dualism is out. We have two other views. One is the materialistic, monistic view. There's only matter. The problem with that is that when you start looking at matter, it becomes non-material, right? You go to the most basic level of what is matter, and it's not there. So the materialist, monistic view, is also out. The third view is called, for lack of a better word, monistic idealism. There's only consciousness, okay? And consciousness conceives, governs, constructs, and appears as matter within itself. So when I asked you to imagine a sunset, it was in your consciousness and it was non-material. But if I ask you, what's this color? What's this color? Huh? Maroon. Okay, so is there a maroon ray coming from here to your eyes? No, it's some electromagnetic energy. But by actually the electromagnetic energy, till it hits your eyes, is a wave. And it has no energy. Once it hits your eyes, it interacts with something, then there's energy, there's an electrical current that goes to your brain, and then you have the experience maroon. So where's the experience maroon? In your consciousness. Where's your body? In your consciousness. And as what? As sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. So these days, in the consciousness research, these experiences are called qualia. Qualia, quality of consciousness. Subjective experiences are qualia, but so is the material world qualia, including your body and your brain. It's kind of complicated, but in the end, that worldview holds true. That there is only consciousness. The rest is all appearance.
Thank you. Question here.
I work in the material world, and if all the world is intricately connected as one great thought, what is the relevance of my work to avert climate change in the material world?
Well, as you know, are you talking about you working in the material world as a scientist? As a scientist?
I insulate period properties.
Say that again?
He insulates period properties.
Okay. Okay. As you know, there are two kinds of physics to explain the world. The classical laws of physics, which are totally predictable, without which we wouldn't have, all the things that we take for granted, airplanes and so on, and all the technology that we have. But then there's another physics, the quantum field theories, which become unpredictable, where there is creativity, where in fact the Germans have two words for reality. One is Realitat, the other is something called wirklich right, something like that. And what that means, it's alive. It leaves room for creativity. So once you understand that you can operate in both places, one here, but the other to actually understand that your insight, your imagination, your intuition, your inspiration, your choice making, your free will, which is what you're really about, are in that reality. Then integrate the two. How the quantum becomes the material is another problem. Nobody knows. So how do concepts that appear in your conscious mind bubble up from the field of potential that you call the unconscious? Nobody knows.
My wonderful producer, Victoria, is giving me sign that we are running out of time and the next session has to start in 15 minutes.
But you said this morning that there is infinite time.
Infinite time. So, once again, thank you, Deepak, for this wonderful talk. Yeah.